The story happened nearly 20 years ago. At this time, my mother had not yet given birth to me. My family was very poor at that time, so my grandparents gave me a piece of land to build a house. Because the family was still very poor, they built a dirt house that was enough to cover the rain and sun. From this moment on, the scary story in the real estate house begins. My father is a person who specializes in cutting down trees and is generally a logger. He is used to going to the forest. Evil beasts or ghosts are normal things for him. My father said, while sleeping at home late at night, he clearly felt someone climbing on top of him and holding him down. At this time, he was surprised, so he tried to open his eyes but couldn't. In his mind, he knew that at this moment he was being crushed by a ghost, so he tried his best to release that ghost's hand. After a while, I felt light again. When my father woke up, he saw no one, but strangely, on his biceps, someone's hand was clearly visible squeezing his biceps. Then the second story is the same old house. When my mother was sleeping, she heard the sound of pans, cups, and pipes, making a low sound like something was vibrating. My mother thought it was probably a mouse, so she got up and went to the kitchen. But I no longer hear the sounds of sinuses or pans. When everything returned to normal, my mother went back to bed. A moment later, my mother heard a sound again, but it was not the sound from the kitchen anymore, but the sound of a baby laughing and playing in the house. When she opened her eyes and woke up, she was stunned. Near the bed is a woman holding a child standing in the air, her face pale, looking at her mother and seemingly smiling. My mother could only scream loudly for my father to wake up. When my father heard the sound, he woke up and asked what was wrong. My mother told my father the story and then reassured my mother. Sometime later, my mother gave birth to me and bought a spacious house next door, but no more ghosts. When my father asked my grandmother, she told me that when she was young, it seemed like our neighbor's child was buried on our land because she had difficulty giving birth. So mother and child died from exhaustion. At this point, my father got goosebumps. The story happened around 1994, 1995. I don't remember clearly. I live in my hometown in the central region, full of wind and rain, so my stories are as magical as those lands. That day was around September, and it was raining heavily, so my grandfather put the hooves away to catch fish. My grandfather went to his usual place to play croquet and did it like always. But that day was strange. It was raining heavily, but I couldn't catch any fish. As always, there were a lot of fish. He was surprised and was about to leave when he suddenly saw a person on a nearby bridge slowly walking towards him. He asked, "It's going to rain." "Man, I'm going to herd the ducks, but it's raining so hard. If you have some free time, please roll up my pants. They're getting in the way." My grandfather enthusiastically accepted and rolled up his pants to help. But as soon as he lifted up his pants, he saw that his legs were very slimy, and when he rolled them up further, he saw that the flesh on his legs was falling off. And according to my grandfather's experience, he has encountered something evil, that is a dead ghost floating up to tease people and forcing them to follow. At that time, if my grandfather had run away, he would have easily been caught and drowned in the river. He did something from experience, which was to take some salt from his pocket and rub it on his hands and on his shins, and that man disappeared. My grandfather also returned home at that time and never went to that river to fish again. Because according to my hometown's concept, if it follows you, it will catch you sooner or later. The best way to prevent it is to not go to places where you will be met again. As usual, I sat on the bus, taking students to school, listening to music, paying little attention to other classmates who were also on the bus. At one of the pickup stops, I suddenly noticed my surroundings again. I looked towards the small house where the bus was stopping. Tommy's house. I knew that house. Suddenly, a hand passed through the car window and waved to the bus driver to move without having to pick him up. He must be sick, I thought briefly. At the end of the day, I went home to gather with my family. That evening, I watched the local news channel, and what I heard shocked me. Tommy's entire family was killed by an unknown suspect that day. After hearing this news, I returned to my room and quietly fell asleep. The next day, I sat on the bus to school again. Our bus still passed Tommy's house because the bus driver did not know the news about Tommy's family that was shown yesterday. When I was about to stand up to explain to the driver what happened, this image stuck in my mind. A pale hand passed through the bus window, waving at the driver to drive. The car kept going like yesterday. I sat on the bus and was scared. Someone said that once upon a time, there was an extremely beautiful maid who worked for a rich family. Her beauty makes her husband unable to take his eyes off her. While jealous, the wife sent the girl to do a job for her far away in the hope that she would never return. But when she finished, the girl still returned. Her return made the wife so angry that she ordered someone to pull out all the girl's fingernails and cut off all her hair and eyelashes. After that, she cut off her mouth, leaving her usually pretty mouth still smiling gracefully, reaching all the way to her ears. All of the maid's teeth were pulled out, and a hot metal rod was pressed against her body. They buried the girl in one of the walls of the house, leaving only a small vent. One night, while lying in bed with her husband, the wife felt extremely frustrated and insecure. She had trouble sleeping, but felt like someone was watching her, so she didn't dare move. Too scared, she trembled as she pulled the fleece blanket over her head and closed her eyes, then reached out and grabbed her husband's hand to reassure herself. But the wife suddenly realized that the hands she held were very soft, sticky with some fishy liquid, and even scarier, they had absolutely no nails. One rainy night, a taxi driver passed by a dark, deserted street. It passed through a large, cold, creepy cemetery in front of it, thousands of square meters wide. The driver suddenly saw something walking on the side of the road. He looked closely and realized it was a girl with blue eyes, blonde hair, wearing a white dress, wandering barefoot on the street. He was quite scared, but tried to reassure himself that this was just a person walking at night, even though there were very few houses nearby. The girl stood from afar waving at him. This was the sign of a person asking for a ride. The driver pulled the car to the side of the road and invited the girl to sit in the back seat. The driver asked to dispel the fear of driving alone on a rainy and windy night with no one around like this. "Are you leaving at night?" "Yes, thank you, and please take me a little. My house is right in front." The girl's voice was quite soft, and her voice was a bit cold, perhaps influenced by standing in the night dew for too long. The driver happily accepted. He was very happy that there was someone in the car to ease his fear and anxiety, even though this girl seemed very quiet. Passing by the quiet cemetery, the driver tried to restrain himself from shivering from the bone-chilling cold radiating out. The graves are close together, surrounded by luxuriant grass, white smoke mixed with the cold air. Finally, the car safely passed through the large cemetery. The driver immediately turned to the back seat to talk, but discovered that the girl had disappeared.